You're listening to the podcast, version 2.0 and beyond.
So the goal of any corporate is to maximize the shareholder returns, which often comes from profit and from market cap. So there's a huge focus on trying to find ways in which you can optimize it. A few people, however, focus on the very essence of how the corporates are actually able to do that and create that value in the marketplace. Our guest today is Mark LeBusque, who's on the mission to unlock human potential with a specific focus on building the leadership capabilities and their human skills such as self-awareness, resilience, empathy, and vulnerability. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you. Thanks, Kapil, for having me. It's great to be on.
Mark is a very well-known author with his book read by raving fans in 16 countries, and his fame spreads across large organizations across Australia and overseas. What I loved about Mark is that his core message is very unique and it's very different. It's around helping organizations search their truth and put people first by making them safe to speak the truth. It's a privilege, Mark, to be talking to you today. The work that you're doing is really good.
Thank you. Yeah, look, it's quite an interesting place to go, Kapil, is to do this work, which is a little bit different to what the traditional leadership development work has been. But I'm a very strong believer that we're at a tipping point, or well past a tipping point now, where I still believe we have to make money and we need to do the things that bring shareholder value and whatnot. But there's a better way to do that, and that's to bring more humanity into the workplace. I guess this part of the journey has been now 5 years of being out now and working under the banner of marklebusque.com and focusing on two things in particular, which is to help managers to humanise their approach to leadership. And what I mean by that is focusing on getting back to the essence of what it is to be human, which when we look at it, it is to build deep connection and to build a stronger sense of belonging in the workplace. And I think the challenge there has been that most people say, well, you can't measure that. There's not a KPI sheet for those things, so we sort of leave them be. But what I'm helping organisations to understand and to explore is that you don't necessarily need to measure these things. You just need to start to focus on them, and that will start to help on your business results. And the second thing, which I'm passionate about, is something I do which is called provoking with purpose. In provoking with purpose, what I'm teaching teams to do is to hold their nerve with speaking their truth, working under the frame that when we speak our truth, we do it with good intention. We do it to make progress, and we do it in the service of our group. So that's sort of where I am now. Before that, mate, I was 25 years in the corporate world. I started my life as a school teacher, actually teaching 5 to 11-year-old kids, and I still have a passion for learning, whether it's children or with adults. And then I went into the logistics field, and I started my journey from the floor, so loading planes and driving trucks, and then customer service and sales, and sort of have been able to work my way through the system, which kept promoting me because I was technically good at things, and then put me in charge of human beings, and I wasn't that good. So I learned some really valuable lessons, which I'm now trying to, instill and share with other people around the world on when you can put the human in with the technical, you get great results. So that's sort of a bit of the backstory.
Yeah, that's good. So you mentioned about the human approach. Now, obviously, what you do there, I can see that. But why did you choose to focus on that?
I think it's the first thing that you said there. The background around my own personal experience. When I was promoted because I was technically good at things. What I found was that by the time I got promoted at an early age, I was not competent or had no skills in actually being able to deal with other human beings. So I was on a very a quick trajectory, a quick pathway into some great roles as a young person, and I didn't really care too much for the humans, to be quite honest. Back then I was very ambitious, and when I think back to then, I learned a very valuable lesson that the technical stuff that I kept getting better at wasn't going to get me to where I really wanted to get to, which was to be a good leader. There's this statement that I ask myself every day, which is really my purpose now, is about making every human belong. And And that is driven by the whole idea that I think in the workplace today, we are, through our thirst and our desire to continue to grow the bottom line, we're actually destroying the very essence of what it is to be human, which is connection and belonging.
Businesses basically moving from disorganized to organized. So you obviously are creating a system and process to do it. And you have a 7-step process to humanizing the management approach from people's perspective. Now, what's that step? Maybe talk about it a bit.
Okay. So my 7-step process starts with trust. And we have to have a conversation around what does trust mean for people. And when I say that, I literally mean sitting around with your people and getting them to tell you that stuff. And I think once you develop the foundation, like with you've got something to work off, and then you start to build the house. I then go into things like creating a safety net. So how do I, as a manager, create a safety net so that my people feel safe enough to experiment safely, so that they feel safe enough to challenge me? The next one is about clear purpose. And how do we, rather than give someone their job description, have this conversation with them. Tell them why you think they're relevant and how you think they're contributing, not just as an individual, but to your team, to your department, and to your organisation, realising its strategic intent. This starts to create a stronger sense of belonging for human beings, because they start to realise me as an individual actually has an impact on an organisation. The third step is about leadership and letting people know that leadership isn't a right and a privilege and a title. Leadership is an act. And that anyone in the organisation, including the people in my team, have an ability to demonstrate leadership. The fourth one is what I call listen and learn, which is about what we're doing now. We're having conversations, we're getting to know each other, and we're getting to know each other at a human level. You've shared some of your backstory, I've shared some of mine. The listeners can start to realise, there's more to them than just the work guy. Number 5 is about work-life balance, or the balance piece. So allowing people to not just turn up and do work, but turn up as a human being and incorporate other parts of their life. The 6th part is about is what I call unlocking potential, which is about career progression. And look at our careers now. We've taken a pivot. And I'm sure there's lots of listeners who are sitting there today going, I think I'm ready to pivot, but I'm not quite sure what I really want to do. Until you sit down and think about what you're passionate about, you're not going to do that. So as a manager, giving people space to do that. And the 7th one is about coaching. So coaching people to stretch them out of their comfort zone in order to become better versions of themselves. And so they're the 7 steps. So it's a bit long-winded, but those 7 things were what I did. And what I saw out the back of that were 3 things. Really, really happy people, engagement scores in the 90% range. And then the third thing, and I always leave this last, we were 200% over our sales targets 2 years in a row.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I think it makes so much sense, because you're talking to people, you're building relationship. So what do you suggest to organizations when you find that there is actually probably a bad manager in that mix somewhere, or a person who's conceived or who's perceived as a bad manager?
Yeah. So the first thing I'm going to say to that is, I reckon that you've got to look back at yourself first and say, well, how have I contributed to that person being a bad manager? Maybe I've made the wrong selection. So, there are bad managers around, but perhaps the system that we work in is a question for people to consider. What if the system we work in creates bad managers rather than managers doing it? Because I think most human beings turn up to work to do good work and have to do good work with other human beings.
This particular problem that you are trying to resolve, that people like me, all of us are trying to work to make people's life better. Now, this situation will always continue. What do you think is the root cause of this kind of organizational level cultural challenge? And are you doing any work to actually attack that at a grassroots level?
Yeah. What a great question. We are so transfixed with, you can't manage what you can't measure. So everything has to be measured. But it's very hard to measure humanity and the humanness that comes into organizations. So we park that to the side and we call it soft. It's soft skills and things like that. So I think that there's a mindset shift that's needed, because at the moment we're anchored to the promotion of technical competence, and then we see people fail, and then we see their people working for them fail and become disillusioned, and then we have a massive cost in, attrition, rehiring, all of the sorts of things we have to do. And it might well be in the future that the really good managers aren't going to be technically strong in the area that they're managing in. Particularly, I'm talking more mid-level managers here, mid to senior, just sort of before senior level, is putting in people who are good at inspiring other people to do their work will actually make the work happen better. Yeah. The other thing I'll just add here, I think, is we actually need to reframe what work is as well. And we need to add an element in. So there's the technical work again, there's the stuff we do every day, and then there's the human work. There's a social element to work that we need to start to acknowledge. And if we can add that into the other work, I think that will change the way that we turn up each day.
Yeah, that's great. In fact, I was just, as you were talking, I was just also able to relate to something I read, which is around the whole concept of knowledge worker is going to go to a different level altogether, where, you even start asking question, why do people need management? Management is more of aggregation and consolidation. So some of the people actually don't probably need that kind of aggregation and consolidation. Some of the people are self-driven, especially in today's generation when people are working from wherever they want. Do you need to actually manage them or actually incentivize them to just do their deed? Today's generation is like that. And I guess things will change, and people at our age group definitely need to move along, because we will be sitting at the corporate hierarchy top level, not able to understand the need of this entire generation, which has got massive value to give.
Yeah.
So I believe that's probably also something that is going to happen in time to come, about self-management.
Yeah, I think. Look, I always think there's going to be a need for someone to provide a bit of direction. But maybe if we thought about this way, rather than a manager, what if I thought of myself as an enabler? Like a manager is a bit of it almost feels like it's hierarchical, it's transactional. An enabler is someone that, go off and do what you need to do.
Yeah, I think this term would stick with me in terms of that managers are enablers, and it's a privilege to have people under their care. So that's so good. So you also have another term called humanivate yourself, right? So we'll just talk a bit about. I love that term, by the way. I can guess what it is, but what's your?
So there's I was just sitting down. It's interesting when you get a bit of time, as you know, in this space you're in, you get time to sit and think. And when I wrote my first book, and I started out with this idea that we are human beings, but we've become human doings. And what I'm really trying to help, and actually this Monday, June the 3rd, I launched what's called the Global Humanivation Challenge. And to give the listeners some understanding of that, is that I continually question my clients, and when I speak at conferences and whatnot, about put your hand up if you have a to-do list. And everyone's got a to-do list, and it's a work to-do list and a home to-do list and a self-to-do list, and no one's getting through them because we're just busy doing stuff. And then I ask them, does anyone have a to-be list? And everyone looks at me like very strangely. And then when I explain to them that a to-be list is a very intentional list of how you're going to choose to be at any particular time of a day or on a day. For instance, when I go to a meeting, I'm going to choose to be participative in the meeting, because that'll help me get things done rather than just turning up to the meeting to do things. The to-be list and the humanivation piece is moving us. Humanivation is really about moving us from a high focus on doing to adding the being bit to that as well. So if I start to become more intentional about how I choose to be every day, I reckon the doing happens better. So my challenge I've set for from Monday the 3rd of June, and people can register on a website, which is www.humanivationchallenge.me. They can go in there, and for 50 days, because I go past the 21-day habit-breaking thing, I'm different and I want it to be longer. For 50 days, they go in each day and they actually just put in a word. And it says, today I choose to be, so my word for today is curious. I'm going to embrace curiosity today.
No, that's a good, In fact, when you spoke about that busy, I actually wrote probably an hour, maybe a year or a couple of years back about busy versus productive. And this was derived completely out of when you go into an elevator specifically, you see two people talking and the usual question, how's it going? And said, oh, very busy. And it's just become such a buzzword and it's such a habit that the only thing people say is, oh, very busy, very busy. So I'm like, how about saying that I'm having a productive day? It'll look odd, but we do need to, it's just like that word enabler. We need to change the way we talk. I mean, maybe it's a dramatization up to some extent, but we need to change the way we are, the way we talk, set the standards, and to be rather than to do. Yeah, I think those are awesome. How do you see your environment change because of all the efforts you're making and people around you are making, and how you're inspiring other leaders and other coaches to do similar things? So how do you see the environment changing in next 20 years?
Look, I think, and I'm glad you said 20 years, because I often say to my clients that the work of human is a long game, and it's a hard game. So, there's a bit of a romance in workplaces today to say, let's get someone in and we'll do a 2-day program to humanize our people. And it's like, yep, we've done it, and then they can go back and be human. So, I love the 20-year thing. I think what we'll see is that I think we're going to see more, like, even though we've got all the things coming in like AI and the intelligence, I really say that stuff is good when it's used for good. But I actually think what's going to happen in the next 20 years is that people who have built the human skills will not necessarily be working in one organization for a long time, but it'll be a bit like the gig economy. It'll be a little bit like, in some respects, the gun for hire. These people will move around from organisation to organisation because they're very, very good at building connection and belonging quickly and inspiring people to do work. So, we'll still have our big businesses, but I actually think the people within the businesses, the titles and the hierarchy and the structures will start to dissipate, and when they'll be filled up by people who are there because they're fit for purpose. I can mobilise and enable human beings to do good work. So I'll just go from one organisation to the next to do that. And I think that's one thing. We're still going to need a level of technical proficiency, even though the robots are coming. As we hear, the robots are coming. We're still going to need a level of technical proficiency to keep building those robots to do what they do. So we're still going to have both. The other thing I think is going to happen in work is I actually think we're going to work less hours. So what we're going to end up with is something that's quite interesting in some respects. We say we want more time for ourselves. We're going to get more time for ourselves, but what we're going to need to be able to do is work out what to do with that time. I think busyness will become something that people either select into or select out of. That's sort of what I envisage in 20 years' time, and it's going to take 20 years.
Well, that's great, Mark. I was actually going to ask you a question that what's your message, but I think along with that, you've also given the message. So Mark, look, this is fantastic. Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. Is there anything else that you think, you want to share with our viewers?
This is hard work. And because there's a system that's been in place for 100 years and it's rewarded people, you're going to get a lot of resistance to be more human in the workplace. So you're going to have the cynical people who will say, oh, you can't measure it. It's too soft and fluffy and, it's all kumbaya. And I think I'm going to leave these 3 words for people to think about. Hold your nerve. So I want to leave people with a message of, if you're doing this and it's starting to feel a bit challenging, hold your nerve, because it's the right thing.
Awesome, Mark. That's a good ending for the podcast in terms of hold your nerve. That's a great message. Thank you for that. Thanks for your time, Mark.
My pleasure.